Hey there, Jeff Manchester from iZotope. Welcome back to From Scratch. It's an ongoing video series that deep dives into a tool and welcomes you to it as though you're coming in completely fresh. In this series, we take our time going over as many modules and parameters as possible front to back so that by the end you feel like you can be successful deploying the tool in your next production. Today, we're going to cover iZotope Neutron. Neutron is an intelligent channel strip that's great for all kinds of mix elements like guitars, drums, bass, group processing, and much, much more. You can follow along with the chapter markers below or use the markers to skip ahead so that you can hear about a module that you really want to know about. If there's a product you'd like to see featured in this series next time, please let us know in the comments. And without further ado, let's jump in. Okay, we are in Pro Tools and let's bring in Neutron 4. So I can search for it here. One of the nice things about Pro Tools, Neutron 4, there it is. So one of the first things that you should know is that when you call it up, you can actually resize it by just dragging this and then dragging it back. Very easy to do. Let's cover the module section and then the top and then the I/O section over here last. Starting with the equalizer, this is where we start. This is home base. It's going to instantiate by default. If you want, you can bring in the parallel control here via the mix parameter. So I can bring in just a taste of the equalization's processing, or I could have it all the way or not at all. It's just another way to give you control over the sound. And typically you would have to set up auxes and buses to get a parallel return. In this situation, we only have one mix parameter. Very easy to go back and forth here. We also have this button, which turns the module on and off. We have this button here. And when you press this, you actually get custom module presets. And these were all designed by iZotope sound designers, and you can go and actually audition them in real time. So that's how that works. You can also close the module with the X button and it's gone. And it'll kind of greet you with this screen, which says start building your sound. Press this to bring other modules in, this plus button here. If I want, I can rearrange the order and this will affect, how sound is going through left to right, right? So the very last stage of processing will be my equalizer and the very first one will be the exciter, or you can, manipulate these to your heart's content. And that is essentially how these modules work and behave and how you interact with them and get them to affect whatever it is you're doing in your mix. Let's close these out and then go to the top of the plugin. So right next to Neutron, the icon here, we see this field where I can input text and write, hello, there it is. This will be meaningful in a moment when I go to other modules, but just so you know, you can input text in that field. We also have these two tabs. Right now, this rectangle with the three dots above it, this is the detailed view. We have a lot of modules, a lot of parameters, a lot of detail. This box right here brings us to the assistant view, and we see a little circular animation show up. I'm not going to get into the assistant just yet. There's more to cover until we get there. What I want to do is focus more on the UI. So let's continue along our journey here. So you saw earlier, I showed you the individual module presets when you click these three little bars. Well, over here, we have global presets. So you can call up a bunch of modules to affect the sound from here, depending on if you're working on a bass, drums, individual drums, guitar, whatever. In this case, we're working on a full drum track. So I'll go drum bus, and you can do the same thing, audition them all in real time. And if you happen to add your own, they'll show up here in the custom pane. And that is the global preset menu. Of course, you don't have to have that window open. I just closed it, but I can still toggle between presets by going to these two arrows here. if I want to go back in time at a very specific, level, I can press this and it'll bring me to the history window. And over the course of filming this video, I made a bunch of moves. We can see them all here. We can go back in time to when I added everything, all the things that I did, or go kind of forward in time. It's totally up to you. And one of the great things is that you can actually audition different clusters of processing. So let's say I want to try this punch with 182, and I want to try modern, and I want to try vintage as well. I can go here and press punch and set that as one preset. I can go here to the next one, which I believe was the modern compressor, hit that, and then have this one, which I believe was the vintage one, press that. And now I can toggle between them on the fly. Cool. So I bet many of you didn't even know this was a feature in Neutron. It's been in there for a while. It's not new to Neutron 4, but now you know it's in there. We also have this little lightning icon, which indicates a zero latency mode. Now, some of the modules are disengaged when you have this on, like Sculptor, and also certain limiter algorithms. They won't be able to be accessed when you're in the zero latency mode. Hitting the gear wheel gives you access to customizability in Neutron 4. You can change the metering, you can change transient, compressor, equalizer modules to your heart's content. It's also great if you're talking to customer care and they ask you what the serial or version number you have. It's usually hanging out in this little options menu. So you can see mine is 4.0.0. And you can also, from this menu, enable tooltips, which, when enabled, allow you to hover over certain parameters and settings, and it'll tell you at a glance what they do. Switches to the assistant view, or blends process signal with the original unprocessed signal, the parallel mixing thing I was talking about earlier. So it's a great way to familiarize yourself with the application. You can also press this button here, and when you do that, the documentation will show up in your web browser, and you can go in and dive deeper and become a pro with Neutron 4. Another kind of quick way to get there is just turn tooltips on, and this way you can kind of see at a glance what's going on in the tool. Now over here we have our input output and we have the limiter. So you turn the limiter on by clicking it, and now we have this orange thing that appears with a circle. This is our ceiling, and we can set our ceiling however we want, and you can see these orange numbers change. And we also have algorithms, styles, and modes here. We have thick, clean, and smooth. And for the modes, we have Intelligent Release Control IRC LL, low latency, IRC 2, which is both are out of Ozone. And we have hard, which is kind of like a brick wall limiter. So you can cycle between these unless you're hanging out in the global zero latency mode. You do get the hard mode. However, you don't get IRC LL and IRC 2. So let's go back and explore input output. So we have input slider right here, output slider right here, depending on what you want to do. Double click to return them to default. There we go. We have a bypass button. We have some channel operations down here. This is sum to mono. This is invert polarity. And we also have channel swap left and right. We can also control the panning and the width. So panning all the way left, all the way right, back to 0, and width we can play with as well. I think that's a pretty comprehensive tour of the UI. Let's get into the assistant view. So as I was mentioning, click here and it's telling you, I need input. I need to know what's on the track. And this is what iZotope is really known for. It's the assistant, intelligent technology that listens to your audio and gives you a push in the right direction to kind of set you on a good, solid sonic path. So I'll play some audio to get started, and then I'll explain what we see when we hit the other side of this process. Okay, so we've reached the other side, and now we get to the assistant view. which is very different from the detailed view, which is probably a bit more familiar to Neutron 1, 2, and 3 owners. The assistant view gives you a really easy way to manipulate your sound all in one area without having to have like EQs open and all that stuff. Some of the parameters here, the intent controls, are talking to some of the modules over here in the detailed view. I'll go over them more in a minute, but I just want to give you a sense of how these two tabs kind of connect with each other and how the two sets of processing, you know, on the assistive and the detailed side talk to each other and work together to get you a great sound. So right off the jump, we have this left side here. You'll notice that we are hanging out on kick. During that listening pass, it was trying to listen for what instrument was on the track in Pro Tools. It got it wrong. It thought it was kick. It's actually drums. This can happen. All you have to do is reassign it over here to drums. And these are targets, right? Snare, toms, and drums. And you'll notice as I move between these targets, the orange blob changes. Now, what this orange line represents is the healthy distribution of energy for the particular target that you're on between low, mid, and high. People who are familiar with tonal balance control will recognize this scheme, and it's right from that product. We've introduced it though at a track level. So if I'm on drums, I get this very almost smiley curve type target. And this tells me that lows are right around in this energy range here, from here to here. Highs here, we're kind of understated in the mids and upper mids, but it's a pretty smooth kind of line all across. For snare, it's a bit different, right? Not too much low, a lot of snap, a lot of high mid. So it's almost educational and kind of instructive. Toms, low mid bump, low bump over here, not too, liberal in the high mids and highs. So let's leave it on drums. And what I'm going to do is move this slider. What this slider does is it will conform your source to this new target, this drums target. And the way you'll know this is happening is when I play audio, you'll see a white line in front of this wormy orange thing. And when I bring this all the way over, the white line is going to conform to the orange outline. And this is the processing in Sculptor over here, trying to blend in and kind of fit the dress code of this drums target. Bring it all the way over here. It's going to kind of remain at whatever state that it was when we first started, wherever I got this sample, that kind of thing. So there's that line. Let's bring it up and listen to the changes too. So a lot more sparkle. We're getting much more of a dip here in the low mids. Bring it back down. So where you might want to leave it is somewhere halfway in between. It's up to you. If you like what you hear at 100%, cool. If you want to kind of remain close to the vibe of the original song, but go, a bit kind of in the middle, leave it somewhere between 40 and 60%, totally up to you. But as I mentioned, one of the cool things here is that you are controlling via the intent controls stuff on the detailed view side. So if I bring this tone match all the way to 100, Sculptor's module here is all the way at 100. If I bring this down at 0, it's 0. So they're talking to each other on both sides, okay? Let me bring this up, leave it there, 63, right, 64. And now what I'll do is go over some of the controls down here. We have punch, we have distort, and we have width. Now punch introduces a new style of processing. It's a dynamics processor that brings an intelligent expansion or compression. And that's the first stop down here. So what I'll do is bring this up and bring this down. When I bring it down, we're getting more compression style. When I bring it up, we're getting more expansion. Have a listen. That's expansion. Compression. Now, attack and sustain. When I bring attack up, what I'm going to get is a softening of the musical hits. When I bring it down, I'm going to get a kind of punching up of the musical hits. Have a listen. Soft, more punchy. With sustain, I'm going to make these musical hits kind of sharper. If I bring this down a little higher, I'm going to have them ring out a little bit longer, those musical hits, elongate them a little bit. So start with it up. Down. Right? Almost like a gated effect. So these controls are meant to kind of very quickly get you in the ballpark sonically of what you're after without you having to talk to nodes on an EQ or, ratios on a compressor. It's supposed to be very gut level as you move, okay? So we also have Distort. Now we have two different algorithms. We have the original exciter settings, retro, tape, warm, and tube, but we also have the trash style from our Trash 2 product in here as well, and you can go over these with the XY pad and move between different algorithms. I'm going to put it on the trash one. This is the legacy one. Trash is here. We have clipper, overdrive, scream, and scratch. And let's go around and see what those sound like. Here's scream, overdrive, scratch. I'm going to leave it in the center and move tone up and down. When I bring this up, I'm going to kind of tilt the balance of the distortion to really excite the highs. I'm going to go down. It's going to favor the lower frequencies, right? Width, pretty self-explanatory. We're going to widen the stereo image. Or narrow it. So now that you get a sense of what these intent controls do and what the tone matching does, I just want to make it really clear what's happening on the other side and give you a bit of a word of warning, let's say. So again, as I move this up to 100, bam, Sculptor's all the way at 100. Same thing with the punch module. If I bring this down, right? Let's go over here. Now it's down. Punch, right? Go to the next band. It's down too. Bring it up. Or halfway or something, let's say. Halfway, right? Halfway. This band's out of commission. It's not doing anything. The idea here is that we're trying to get you to start with the assistant view as a best practice, move over to the detailed view to do your work, and then move on to the next track. One of the things you might encounter is when you start making moves over here, and let's say you're like, okay, cool, I'm going to go back to the assistant view to do a bit more work. You will hear things change as you move the intent controls around, but Neutron isn't really built for you to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So we've thought about this, and that's why you'll see this blue little icon appear. And what this is telling you is you've entered a kind of no man's land here with your processing. Let's start the process over again and reset the initial target settings. So I click that and it resets everything over here and it resets everything over here as well, okay? So it's going to reset things on this side and on this side. And one thing you should know is that if you want to do a global reset of your assistant pass, all you have to do is go to relearn and you can get this audio, relearning started over once more, okay? So we covered the UI, we covered how to move modules around, parallel processing. We've introduced you to the assistant view. I want to talk about another feature within the assistant view, and that is the ability to bring in a target that you really like. So let's say that you have a track that a client has sent you. I want my guitar to sound like this, or I want my drums to sound like that. You can impart the vibe of that track onto the track that you're working on. So you'll notice, we have bass, guitar, keys, all the rest of it. Down here, we have a special section. In fact, I already brought in a sample, but let's start from scratch, right? Go down here, and let's say we have a drum sound that we really like. I'll press this plus button. It'll take me to my Finder. I have a folder called Great Samples, And then I have this drums groove here, which doesn't really sound like the one that I have, but it has a nice crispy top end that I really like. So before we get too deep, I just want to remind you again of what this drums target looks like that we start off with in Neutron 4. Not too hyped here on the top end, but let's bring in this target. Once again, here's what it sounds like. And now it opens up and we get this new orange target. And look how hyped the high mids are. Nice and bright. The low end is a bit more voluminous too. And so I can go over here to drums. This was the original, right? And here's ours. So we get a big difference. So now let's use this tone matching slider to have our track meet the sonic dress code of our reference. So that's pretty extreme. Here's before. Now we're actually hearing not just the tone matching, but also the punch and the distort. So I'm going to turn those off and do a proper before and after of just the reference sculpting. So you can see that this doesn't just work with drums. You can also bring in some amazing guitar examples or kick drums. I think we actually used a kick, or maybe it was a snare in one of our videos that we did for launch. All kinds of sources you can bring in and kind of build a library of amazing sounding references that you'll want to use in future mixes. So the next module that I want to talk about is called Unmask. It's a brand new module in Neutron 4. What it's designed to do is untangle and tackle any psychoacoustic masking issues happening between two tracks. It could be a kick and a bass. It could be a right-hand piano and a right-hand guitar. It could be a vocal and something else. This is designed to very quickly, with very minimal routing, get you one sound, wiped away from another in a way that's very customizable as well. So in this situation, I've got two tracks here. I have strings and a vocal. Have a listen.
A reunion meant for everyone. A reunion meant for everyone. Everyone.
So especially at the very end here, it gets a little cloudy. It's kind of hard to hear everything he's singing because the strings and his voice are kind of in the same range, especially those very high strings. So what I've done is I brought a neutron on the track that is causing the problems. And the way that you want to route this is the following. You want to make sure that you have the track that is needing to be heard, in this case my vocal, out on a bus. Some DAWs make it much easier for you to route things, but I have my vocals going out bus 1. And then I'm going to set the sidechain input to bus 1. So now I'm funneling through my vocal onto my strings neutron. So my strings neutron is right here at the top. I don't have a neutron on the bottom. It's just going out a bus. It's stereo, but we have a bus 1 that should be just fine. And watch what happens when I bring up this parameter here.
A reunion meant for everyone. Everyone. Welcome to the coronation.
So what we see is when we bring in this parameter here, it is very intelligently getting the strings out of the way of the vocal. That's what this guy is designed to do. People who are coming from Neutron 1 to 3 might be aware of an EQ functionality called the masking meter. That's still here, and I'm going to show you that in a moment. But what this does is it removes the steps for you having to do all that like masking kind of viewing and then bring my one EQ here and there. It just does it automatically for you with one tool essentially. So once you have things routed properly, bring this parameter up, which is a kind of a mount parameter, until you're happy with the amount of unmasking. It's very subtle here. I only have it at 14%. But this purple line represents my vocal coming through on bus 1. The gray one in the back is the strings, and this guy here, this orange one, this is the difference meter, showing you where it's pushing down to make room for my vocal. I can even bring these bands in if I don't want masking to be happening in a certain region of the spectrum.
Welcome to the coronation.
You have other controls here to further refine the processing. There's sensitivity, which is kind of how much processing power is going to go into unmasking one source from another. So if I bring this up, you'll see some really steep dips here, and also some artifacts. To me, that's too much, obviously. So double click, bring it back to its default 50. This is, after all, a bit of a compressor, so we have attack and release settings. So how quick spectral shaping happens, and then how slowly or quickly it lets go in the release. Let's do before and after. Here's before. So especially that every one part, that's where I think you can really hear the difference that the unmasking or Unmask module makes. And another great thing is that you have an extra gain staging tool here with this mix slider. So you can, after you're done your processing on sensitivity, attack, release, and amount, you can go in and further just kind of soften or make more subtle the unmasking effect with this mix parameter. So it's very customizable, turn it on or off. And of course, we have a couple of really nice presets for you, just a couple here that you can use to really jumpstart what you're doing, as long as your routing is the way that I've showed you. You've got your input here, your key input or sidechain input set to the thing that you want to shine, and you park a neutron for on a thing that's causing the problem, in this case, strings. The next thing that I want to explore is the equalizer, because it shares a little bit of DNA with Unmask, and we'll get to that more in a moment. But you call on it by going over here and calling it up. There's only one. I've already called it up here. And we have, I believe, 12 bands that we can add just by clicking anywhere here and adding them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Is it just 10? 11, 12. Yep, there we go. So we all kind of know how an EQ works. Neutrons is very intuitive. We have up or down. We can widen or narrow the Q. This EQ is also very context specific. So if I'm starting from over here, we get right away a high cut, or a high pass, I should say. We're allowing the highs to pass. If we go over here, we get a low pass. We can also add a nice shelf over here, or a low shelf over here, and we have our bell features over here. So very easy to kind of get your head around it. We also have this heads-up display that shows up, and from here we can customize the shape if we want something else than what we have to start with. We see a kind of musical note to show you where you are. You can actually go over here and bring a piano roll up, and then you can see very specifically where you are according to the piano roll. You can also play with your spacing, mel, extended log, flat log, linear. It's totally up to you. You also have some pretty clever dynamic controls over here too. So you'll notice that when I move this to dynamic, we have these two little arrows that appear, and we either have expansion or downward compression and suppression of certain harmonics. So if I play this with the down arrow engaged, I'm going to cut right at this frequency. And I can play with the threshold. Or I can go up and I can boost at this area.
meant for everyone, everyone.
I can do that across a number of the other nodes as well. And I can also have them sidechainable to whatever your sidechain source is over here. And you can go either external, internal, or just close this partition and keep moving. So it's a very flexible equalizer. Don't need to spend too much time on the EQ. You can also click this and get a bunch of great EQ presets specifically for the EQ module. Now, I do want to mention a cool feature that a lot of people don't know about, and that is this learn function right here. So when I press this and play some audio, the nodes are going to settle around areas of sonic importance. Watch this.
A reunion meant for everyone, everyone.
So you notice how they all settled around here? They knew where those peaks were and said, hey, there's something going on. You should maybe investigate. We're going to put the nodes there, and if you want to duck or dip from there, it's totally up to you. So that's a nice way to give you a head start when you're EQing stuff and you're not really sure where to cut. It looks for those sonic anomalies, those buildups, and just places the nodes there, and you can get started. We also have soft saturation, which adds a British console style saturation to the input source here, especially if you're boosting, right? You're really gonna hear it. So you just turn that on and off. It's a very subtle thing, but it's there for you. We also have this masking meter. Now, I mentioned earlier, we have this place where you can input text, right? Let's put vocals. It's already there actually. And over here on this other Neutron, we have strings. And it's because I typed it in, strings. So one thing I can do, if I want to go back to the old way that we unmasked one track from another, is to call up an EQ on my strings track now. And let's say I want to untangle my strings from my vocals. Go to the masking meter, and I'm going to go find my vocals Neutron. And through interplugin communication, I can do this. I can talk to both. I can press this, and now when I click, the orange trace represents my vocals, and the gray one in the back here represents the strings. And these flashing lights represent areas where these guys are masking each other. If I want to see what things look like on my vocals track, I could click here, and now I have my vocals Neutron. The Equalizer module is right here. It's not a ghost EQ. It can actually move things around and make some moves to unmask one track from the other. So remember these cuts here. Let's go back to the vocals. There's the cuts. I can also use some tools down here to make it really easy to, let's say, dip at exactly a certain place in one track and then have a mirror boost on the other track with inverse link. See that? So right now I'm cutting on my vocals and boosting on my strings track. Let's go back to the strings EQ. There, I've got string boost right there thanks to inverse link. So you can have a very precise mirror image boosting and cutting so that you're untangling things exactly where you need them to be untangled. I can increase the sensitivity and bring up a histogram of sorts to show where the most critical masking is occurring. And we'll see some pink columns here emerge at the very top of the UI when I do that. So this is showing me that I need to kind of concentrate my unmasking effort and work right around this area. And if you remember from the previous example that I showed you with the Unmask module, a lot of where that difference meter was trending and cutting was right from this, I don't know, let's say 300 hertz to 6K region. And that's something that I wanted to mention about the Unmask module is it's not just taking the sidechain input and creating a perfect amount of space like inverse link does. It's using psychoacoustic masking knowledge to go, here's where I think the masking is happening. Let me separate the two just in these regions, and also let you take over and really customize the ballistics and behavior of the unmasking so that it's not just a clean, like when one thing goes up, the other goes down. It's smooth and transparent. So that's the EQ module. We did unmask. We did the assistant view, the UI. We're moving right along. So the next module that I want to introduce you to is the Exciter module, which has been vastly improved upon since Neutron 3, because we've added a couple of new features like the tone slider, like the trash algorithm, and the tame functionality to it. So let's start at the start. Call it up from the plus menu. There it is right there. We have full, defined, and clear. These will tilt the harmonic emphasis of the saturation towards certain areas of the spectra. So for full, let's see what it says. Gentle low mids frequency bump, defined, high mids frequency bump, and then clear is a low mid frequency attenuation. So play with those however you want. Let's start with the classic excitation over here. Trash is this. We'll stay in this lane. What I can do is leave classic on here, bring the amount up, and we will hear right away on this bass track the difference that these harmonic profiles make to our sound. Let's start with warm. Retro. Tape. Tube. Or blend them all together. Here's where we started. Now there's a few different ways to gain stage within the Exciter module. We have one amount slider here, which is how much of the dry signal that we're driving into the saturation, the excitation. But we also have this mix parameter, which lets you control, the blend between the, amalgamation of all these profiles here and the dry signal. So now we're just hearing the original. Bring it in. We have another mix slider up here. These different stages are helpful because when you're dealing with saturation, especially on the trash level, it can get pretty gnarly. So it's really nice that you have different ways to control and manage the flow of loudness across the tool here. We also have this nice filter here, which takes some of the bite out of the high frequency information. So I'm just going to jump right to trash here and show you this. Just bring this in, just takes the bite out. Gives it a bit of a haircut. We also have, let's go back to classic, this tone slider, which will accentuate some of the highs or lows depending on where we put our balance distortion-wise. So we're going to really favor the high frequency information here when we go to tone and have that really kind of drenched in saturation. You can even see it here in the metering. Or we'll go to lows. Great for 808s. Bring it back to the center. You can also automate this, right? That gives you a bit of a walkthrough into the main functionality of the Exciter. If you want to get really tricky, you can actually go multiband, right? And go like this. And now you can have different excitation settings per band, which is really helpful. And you can also alter the bands, or you can use Neutron's learn function to set these coordinates for you between each of the bands. So now these settled, and you can just click to know exactly where 247 and 5.9 thousand cycles. Let's go over to trash. I'm just going to go, single band here. Let's have a listen to these distortion profiles and then get into tame. Let's start with scream and then go to overdrive, clipper, and then scratch. So that gives you a little preview of what you can do. The tame function here, we'll just read what it says. This enables or disables preservation of the dynamics of the original signal when you're adding harmonic distortion. So one of the consequences of using a lot of compression and distortion is you lose a lot of the articulation and movement of the source. What this allows you to do is get some of it back. The best place to preview this, I'd say, would probably be drums, which are over here, I think, in my session. So when I bring tame on, we're going to retain some of the dynamics of these drums, whereas before they were kind of washed away in distortion. Now there will be a bit of a level drop, and you can always compensate for that by using some of the input-output tools over here. But just so you can hear it, here's before. And here's after. So I might want to bring up the output, bring a limiter just to get, what I lost. But you do notice a lot more movement, right? Versus this. So you have a number of options to customize the amount of saturation that you want to apply to your session, to your track. And that is, in a nutshell, the Exciter module. And of course, you've also got a number of great module-specific presets here, which you can explore at your leisure. The hard-working sound design people at iZotope left these here for you to enjoy. So check them out. So the next thing I want to explore with you guys is the compressor. Now, the compressor has been overhauled too. We still have modern and vintage algorithms, but we also have the punch mode, which I talked about a little bit in the earlier section on the assistant. So we have a bit more kind of central control of it over here than we do in the intent controls, because we have a whole, dedicated section over here. So remember, amount up is expansion, amount down is compression. And one clever way that you can tell what's happening where is if you bring it up, watch this line go from south to north, bumping up and essentially expanding. If I bring it down, you can see that it starts at the top of the ceiling and then goes down to signify that we're compressing. Once again, up, expanding. So again, I mentioned these before, but I'll just reiterate them. We have attack and we have sustain. Bringing things down with the attack makes things a little bit punchier. Bringing them up softens them. Sustain, we get a sharper kind of orientation on the musical hits. And if I go up, we get a more extended, sustained, if you will, behavior on the musical hits. It's up to you. There's also a makeup gain over here and a really clever waveform display here, so you can see what's happening on a gain trace level too. So this is compression and expansion. We'd actually really encourage you to get into some multiband processing. In fact, a lot of the presets, specifically for punch, if you go to the preset menu for the module, really make use of the multiband settings. So I'm not going to go over all that stuff here, but let's have a listen to some of them. that is Punch, and that's how that works. We also have Modern and Vintage, and when you get Modern and Vintage, you'll notice that we have Ratio and we have Threshold. The DSP in Punch is actually intelligent enough to know where all the musical hits are thanks to some under the hood stuff. So that's why you don't have a threshold. It's very intuitive. You just move things up or down until you like the sound, or you don't, and then you tweak it until you do. But with Modern and Vintage, you do have a bit more control because they're a bit more old school in the way that they function and operate. Makeup gain, of course, you can sidechain over here, turn this on, external, full, etc. And you also have peak detection here, RMS, peak, or true peak. And you have another learn functionality here, which will automatically set the crossovers of your bands depending on the audio material. One brand new addition to Neutron 4 is the oscilloscope view, which existed earlier in another version of Neutron for MPS Pro subscription. It's now in Neutron 4 as well. To get at it, you just have to click one of these displays. It's the one at the far right. And now you have a really interesting oscilloscope view of your audio. So what you can do is see the effect that your compression is having in real time on the waveform. Bring the threshold down. Really squash it. And if you're sidechaining something to your Neutron, you can have it sidechained, and then you'll see both sources represented too. One in purple and the other here in white. In this case, I'm just sidechaining a Neutron to a Neutron, so you're not really going to see anything. We're going to do more tutorials on this, and in fact, we've already done some for Neutron Pro, but that is a little overview of the compression module, and specifically the new punch mode contained therein. So let's talk about Sculptor next. Sculptor is spectral shaping technology. It's like an army of multiband compressors that are working in real time to smooth and sculpt your sound, eliminate resonances, and just polish and sparkle up whatever it is you're working on. I showed you earlier that Sculptor was talking to the tone slider in the assistant view. Here it is in its own dedicated space. And it's really easy to use in this form as well. All you have to do is pick a target. We have a number that we've already built out. So this is a drums thing. So I'm going to go to percussion, drums, and it opens up just like that. I could bring up the amount. I could skew the tone to get a brighter sound. Or I could skew it down to get a boomier, lower sound. And I could play with the ballistics. Think of this as an attack and release control. Very slow or very fast. I could also use these bands just to apply spectral shaping on a certain area of the spectra. So just want to bring out the mids and upper mids, or I just want to bring out the lows. And leave the rest intact. If I want, I can actually experiment with different targets. So I know this is drums, but let's see what deep bass sounds like on this. Or let's see what add polish sounds like. Pretty subtle. Before. So Sculptor is a very easy one-stop tool to very quickly sculpt your sound in a new sonic direction and have it kind of be its best self according to one of these targets. Or you can almost in a sound design way experiment and see what an electric guitar profile sounds like on, I don't know, maracas. Totally up to you. So we're getting near the end of our journey here. I want to make two last stops, starting with the Transient Shaper, which is a tool that allows you to alter the envelope of a sound and really bring out the sustain information or that initial attack transient information, depending on which way you want to go. And that's what these controls are here for, attack and sustain. And there's a few different ways to kind of customize the ballistics: sharp, smooth, or medium, precise, balanced, or loose, depending on your tastes. And let's just explore the attack and sustain, and you can see what's happening in real time too. So we can see these gain traces really spiking up those transients. I can bring up the sustain. Bring the attack all the way down and just have sustain. Totally up to you. You can also go right to the presets and just explore some of the tools that we've created for you in the Transient Shaper module. And I should also mention that this is multiband too. So just like Trash, just like the compressor, you can add certain amounts of sonic flavoring to certain bands in the CQ here. Let's check out some presets. Before. And just like in the other guys, we might as well mention it. You can hit learn and it'll set these spacers for you. So that is the Transient Shaper. It's designed to allow you a certain amount of control over the kind of room sound, over the initial strike. It's a nice way to de-bleed things if you don't want to hang out all day. And the next thing I want to show you, and the last thing, which is a gate, but it's also a great way just to get a bit more oomph from your drums or bass without having to futz with a compressor or an EQ. It's a great tool. The next and last thing I want to show you is the gate. And, you know, a gate is a gate is a gate. A gate rejects noise depending on where you tell it to reject noise. So it's a little bit like you're wanting to ride a roller coaster, but if you're too short, you can't go through. The same thing is true here. If an audio signal is too quiet or too short, we don't allow it to pass and we attenuate it. We make it quieter. So, for example, in this drum loop here, I could change my threshold here such that anything below it just can't be heard. So now we're not hearing anything because I've set this thing so high, nothing gets through. Everything is too short, so to speak. Let's bring it down. So now I'm rejecting a lot of that kind of hi-hat stuff and just the kick and that snare coming through. Bring it up. Now we're getting a really clean tone of just the kick and snare with a little bit of bleed from the other guys. Now we can control the ballistics of the gate through the ratio, attack, hold, and release. I can even do what's called hysteresis mode here and have a gentler kind of attenuation of when that gate opens and closes. So it's not so aggressive and we won't get that kind of jittering. One of the things you can do is set this here and then use another tool like the Transient Shaper to bring up what you've managed to isolate. So before just the gate. After, to really beef up what we've isolated. And of course, the gate is multiband, just like everything is multiband in Neutron. So we can have different parameters and settings for different areas of the spectrum. And yes, there's a learn. The other really neat thing is that you can also have a sidechain input going to multiple bands. So you can have things triggering different bands at different times and get really technical and almost sound designy with this gate. It's very customizable and also very deep. And of course, there are presets just for you if you want to go in and check out some of the stuff that our sound design team has done. Now, one of the very final things that I want to talk about is a tool or feature that was in Neutron 3 that just isn't in Neutron 4 in the same way. I'm talking about Balance Assistant or Mix Assistant. And this is a technology that will level all of your tracks after listening to what you've told it is like my all-important thing and then all the other stuff that doesn't really matter as much. It's meant to give you an initial balance, a fader mix, if you will. The only way that you can access this feature now is through the Visual Mixer, which is a visual canvas upon which you can send things left or right or up or down in gain, left or right in panning, up or down in gain, across a sound stage. So let me call it up here on the master bus. Visual Mixer Neutron 4. So this should look pretty familiar to people who have been using Visual Mixer, but the new button here is Mix Assistant. So anywhere you have iZotope plugins, you can start to use this tool. In this case, I only have 2 in this session, but intra-plugin communication knows that there's 2. So I could decide, hey, my vocals are really important. So what I'm going to do is highlight these and put this one in focus, and it'll begin listening. This isn't the best example, but it'll begin listening. And then eventually you can go to the results and it'll set a hierarchy for you, and you can go in here and tweak things, bypass the assistant, and get an initial fader mix. It's really important though that you have at unity gain all the faders in your session before using this tool. As if you have a rough mix and then you go to Balance Assistant, it's probably going to give you a skewed, unsatisfactory result. So that's one thing that you have to do. And everything that I mentioned, by the way, is all told to you really at the very front of this experience. So it says here, insert compatible plugins, relay is what's recommended, and then reset the track volume and panning as well, like I just mentioned. Thank you so much for watching the second video in this From Scratch series. Hopefully you feel more empowered to crack open Neutron and use it in your next mix. So now that you're a Neutron power user, be sure to check out the From Scratch series we did on Nectar, iZotope's vocal processor. Take care.